Hey, second graders. I'm back in my book, Fossils. I'm learning some really cool new stuff about how fossils become fossils. I've also learned some really cool new words that I can use. Today, you're going to get to do the same thing. You're going to learn how to define a word from a text using different strategies, and you're going to learn how to describe the steps of fossilization using pictures and words. It's going to be fun. The first strategy up here, the first learning target, says define a word from a text. How can I define a word or figure out what a word means if I don't know what the word means? What am I supposed to do? Well, the first thing I want you to do is use the context clues. What's that? The context clues is just the sentence or the sentences around the word. Usually in second grade level books, it tells you in the sentence what the word means, and you don't have to look so far. You don't have to be like these little kids here that are using magnifying glasses and asking people what the word means. You can just find it right there. Now, sometimes the word, if it's not real clear, after you think you know what the word means, you can check if your book has a glossary. And if it does have a glossary or a list of important words, you can check in the back of the book for that too and make sure you're right. So let's practice this. Remember this page from last time? This was in chapter 1. This is the Hadrosaurus that lived in what is now New Jersey. And remember, this fossil here was showing its scaly skin. Ooh. Bones and more. When you think of a fossil, you probably picture a dinosaur bone or even a complete skeleton. But fossils can be more than just bones. Teeth, shells, and other hard parts of plants and animals can also become fossils. Sometimes an animal leaves behind traces such as footprints, tooth marks, or even impressions of its skin. Traces. I'm not sure about that word. I know trace can mean like when you draw, you can trace something. Let's look at that sentence a little more carefully. Sometimes an animal leaves behind traces. So traces are something that an animal might leave behind, such as footprints. Oh, yeah, an animal does leave behind a footprint sometimes. Tooth marks. Oh, I hadn't thought an animal could bite something and leave behind a tooth mark. Or an impression of its skin. That's what this is up here. The Hadrosaurus, the skin that is scaly, left an impression. So that's what a trace is. It's not actually the animal. It's just like a print or a footprint. Okay, now I figured out what trace means. And I didn't even have to ask anybody or use the glossary. It was right there in the text. I just had to stop and think for a second. Well, let's practice that on a few more. Let's practice that on a few more words. This is the first page of chapter 2. And chapter 2 is called Preserved in Stone. We know that fossils are usually excavated from layers of rock. Excavated? Whoa, that's a big word. We know that. What does excavated mean? And I even made a slide for excavate because it's such an important word. What does it mean? Let's go back to the text and see if we can figure it out. We know that fossils are usually excavated from layers of rock. Let me think of a word that might work. We know that fossils are usually removed from layers of rock. We know that fossils are usually taken out of layers of rock. Excavated must have something to do with fossils being removed from the rock or taken out of the rock. Let me check and see if that's in the glossary. Excavated. I'm looking in the back of my book. No, it's not in the glossary. So I'm just going to go with the meaning that I figured out. So fossils are excavated, they're taken out of the rock. They're removed from the rock. Well, if that's what excavate means, what does it mean? What does excavator mean? What is an excavator? When you add OR to the end of the word, that's like a person who does it. So what is an excavator? Excavator is a person who excavates fossils from rocks. You know something else that I thought was tricky? Look at this. Excavate ends in E, but then when you want to make it be the person that does the work, you drop the E and you add an OR. Excavator is the person that does the work. Okay, so there's two new words we just figured out. Let's go back to the page. We know fossils are usually excavated from layers of rock, but how did they get there? The materials surrounding the fossil didn't start out as rock. In fact, most fossils were formed underwater or in places where the ground was wet and soft. The process of fossilization, whoa, that's a big word, begins when a plant or animal dies and is quickly covered up by layers of mud or sand. Okay, whoa, the process of fossilization. I see a smaller word in that big word that I know. I know fossil. That's the first part of that word. So I know this word must have something to do with fossils. The process of fossilization. T-I-O-N, that shun means something's happening. The process of fossilization begins. Well, the sentence right before it was talking about how fossils were formed. So I think fossilization are the steps that happen when a fossil is formed. That's the process of fossilization. Let me look at my glossary. I wonder if that one's in here. It is. It's right here. Fossilization. The process of turning into a fossil. I was right on that one. So I made us another word card for fossilization. Let's see. Did we finish that page? We had one more piece to read here. So we said fossilization begins when a plant or animal dies and is quickly covered up by layers of mud or sand. Let's take a look at an example of how this happens. Fossilized footprints tell us that this desert was once a soft, wet swamp. Okay, so we're going to go take a look at how fossilization happens. Becoming a fossil. Some 200 million years ago, a shallow ocean covered what is now California. A fish living in the ocean died and sank to the bottom. Before another animal had a chance to eat it, the fish was covered by a thin layer of sand. Over time, layers of sand and mud piled on top of the fish's body, burying it deep under the ocean floor. The skin and soft parts of the fish decayed, leaving only the skeleton behind. Okay, so if you look at the picture here, you see what looks like the bottom of the ocean. It says to become a fossil, a fish would have to be quickly buried before any other marine animals tried to eat it. Some of today's deserts were once covered by oceans and lakes. Okay, so let's back up because I want to talk about what it said. How does a fossil become a fossil? It said first, a fish living in the ocean died and sank to the bottom. And before another animal had a chance to eat it, the fish was covered by a thin layer of sand. Now, did all that happen quickly or slowly? That happened quickly, because if it didn't happen quickly, one of those big fish would have eaten it, right? Okay, so quickly, the fish fell to the bottom of the ocean and a thin layer of sand covered it up. That's the first step of fossilization. Over time, layers of sand and mud piled on top of the fish's body, burying it deep under the ocean floor. Okay, did this step happen quickly or slowly? Yeah, this happened, it says, over time. So that's our key to tell us that it happened slowly. Slowly, over time, layers of sand and mud piled on top of the fish's body, burying it deep under the ocean floor. That's the second step. It says the skin and soft parts of the fish decayed, leaving only the skeleton behind. Okay, so let's take a look at the pictures. We aren't going to read this page. We're just going to look at this image here. We're going to look at the fish and look. So the fish is in the water. This is not air. This is water. And then this is the bottom of the ocean floor. And the fish is swimming along, and I guess it died. So it quickly sank to the bottom and was covered up with a thin layer of sand. Okay, so nobody ate it. Over time, layers of sand and mud piled on top of the fish. So this is kind of like the second step right here. All this layers of mud and sand piled up. Okay, but there was one more word I wanted to talk about too. Let me see if I can see it. The skin and soft parts of the fish decayed. Decayed. What does that mean, decayed? The skin and soft parts of the fish decayed, leaving only the skeleton behind. That second part of the sentence, leaving only the skeleton behind, makes me think that something went away because there was only something left behind. So the skin and soft parts of the fish went away? Yeah, that would make sense, wouldn't it? They decayed. Well, I know that living things, once they die, they do begin to decompose or break back down. I think that's what decayed means. Check my glossary. Oh, went too far. Decayed. Oh, it's not in here, but it's a good thing that I used my context clues and my thinking cap. Okay, so what we're going to do today, I promise you're going to get to make something, and you are. We're going to begin making a book of the steps of fossilization. So what you're going to need to do this book is 2 pieces of paper. They can be blank. They can have lines on them. It doesn't matter. You can tear them out of a notebook. It doesn't matter. But what you do is, and you all know how to do this, because when we're in the classroom, you all use my stapler all day long and paper to make books. You take your paper and you fold it in half. Well, first of all, I have my 2 sheets stacked, right? And then I'm going to fold it in half like this. Now, if you don't have a stapler at home, doesn't matter. You got a book, don't you? And you can turn the pages. Here's the front cover, page 1, page 2, turn it again, page 3. If you have a stapler and you want to use it, or if you have another idea of how to make this book stay together, you can do it. I'm stapling mine very close to the edge, so now mine won't come apart. But again, stapler's the least of your worries. Now you've got a book. Okay, so there was our word card for decay. What are the steps of fossilization? So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make my front cover say, The Steps of Fossilization by Mrs. Lepping. And I might even Google search an image of a fossil and draw it and try to draw it on there and use color like crayons and markers to make a nice cover. But your job today, the assignment that you're going to take a picture of and turn in, is going to be your second, and it's going to be when you turn your front cover, it's going to be here and here. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put, let me see if I can write this where you can see it. At the top of this page, you're going to write step 1. Oh, let me show you. You can see it there. Step 1. And at the top of this page, you're going to write step 2. Now, there are more than 2 steps. That's why we have more pages in our book. But we're only going to do steps 1 and 2 today. Okay? So what I want you to do is, I want you to think about step 1. Let's look back at the text and let's see what exactly it said in the text, what happens in step 1, and then we'll put it in our own words. Do you remember? Or should we look back in the text? I think I remember. But if you want to go back, you can go back. I think it had to do with the fish dies, right? And then it has to sink to the ground before another fish eats it. So I'm going to write that sentence right here below step 1. I'm going to write down a fish dies, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean and is covered by sand. That's what I'm going to say. You might say something different. You can put it in your own words. And then I want you to draw me a picture of that, so it'll help your mind remember that. So draw a picture here. What could you draw here for that step? Could you draw a picture of a dead fish body? Or a picture of a fish sinking down to the bottom of the ocean? You'll come up with something to help you remember that step. Now, step 2 is the part where the fish is covered up by all of those layers. This one's the step that happens slowly. Remember, the fish is covered up by all those layers of mud and sand. So I want you to go back if you need to, or if you remember, and write what happens for step 2. Put down a sentence or two about what happens there, and draw a picture for step 2. What will you draw? I can't wait to see what your drawing looks like. When you get done, I don't need to see every page of your book because all you have now is your front cover and your steps 1 and 2. I just need you to open your book to steps 1 and 2 and take a picture for me of your steps 1 and step 2 page. It may all fit on just one picture. Okay? All right, guys. I'm looking forward to seeing your work today. I'll see you next time.